It was supposed to be a fun weekend. My friend Laura and I were driving to a cabin in the mountains for a little getaway from city life. The route was scenic, winding through dense forests and quiet hills, but about halfway there, our car started sputtering. Before we knew it, the engine died completely. We were stranded on an empty stretch of highway with no cell service. The sun was setting, and with no way to call for help, we decided to walk back to a gas station we had passed about 5 miles earlier. The road was eerily silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. By the time it grew dark, the air was colder, and the faint sounds of the forest around us felt too close for comfort. After walking for nearly an hour, we heard the rumble of an approaching vehicle. The headlights cut through the darkness, and we instinctively stuck out our thumbs. The truck screeched to a halt beside us, its old metal frame groaning under its weight. The driver rolled down the window, revealing a bearded man with small, piercing eyes. He studied us for an uncomfortably long moment before jerking his head toward the passenger door. "Need a ride?" he asked gruffly. Laura hesitated, but I reasoned that we had no choice. It was either this or freeze out here. We climbed into the truck, and the man didn't ask where we were headed. He just started driving. At first, the ride was uneventful, though the man's silence was unnerving. The truck smelled faintly of oil and decay, and the old seats creaked with every bump in the road. When I finally spoke, asking if he was headed toward town, he ignored me. Instead, he took a sudden turn onto a dirt path that veered away from the highway and into the woods. Laura and I exchanged nervous glances. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking. "Where are we going?" The man's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. "Shortcut," he replied curtly. My heart raced as the forest around us grew darker and denser. The headlights illuminated gnarled trees, and the gravel road became rougher. I whispered to Laura that we should prepare to jump out of the truck if we had to. The truck suddenly came to a stop in front of a cabin that seemed abandoned. The windows were boarded up, and the roof sagged under the weight of moss and decay. "Get out," the man said, his voice sharp. Panic set in, and Laura and I bolted out of the truck without looking back. We sprinted into the woods, our feet slipping on the damp leaves. The man didn't chase us, but his guttural yelling echoed through the trees. After what felt like hours, we stumbled back onto the highway. A passing car, a young couple, stopped to help us. We told them everything, and they took us to the nearest police station. The officers seemed concerned when we described the man and his truck. Apparently, there had been several reports of hitchhikers disappearing along that stretch of highway. That night, as I lay awake in the motel room the officers arranged for us, I couldn't shake the image of that cabin or the man's twisted smile. Last summer, I decided to take a solo road trip across the country. I had planned the route meticulously, excited to visit national parks and small towns along the way. But on the second day of my trip, I got caught in a sudden downpour while driving through a desolate stretch of road in the Midwest. Thunder cracked overhead, and the rain came down in sheets, obscuring my view of the road. About an hour in, I noticed a figure on the side of the road. It was a young woman, soaked to the bone, holding a small backpack. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with desperation. I debated whether to stop. Every cautionary tale I'd ever heard about hitchhikers flashed through my mind, but I couldn't just leave her there in the rain. I pulled over and rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" I asked. She nodded and climbed into the passenger seat without a word. Her clothes were drenched and her hair clung to her face. I offered her a towel from the back seat, but she didn't take it. "What's your name?" I asked, trying to make conversation. She didn't answer. She just stared straight ahead, clutching her backpack like her life depended on it. I shrugged it off, figuring she was just shaken from being caught in the storm. As we drove, I noticed her glancing at the rearview mirror every few minutes. Finally, I asked, "Are you okay?" She whispered, "He's following us." Chills ran down my spine. I glanced in the mirror but saw nothing but the dark, rain-soaked road behind us. "Who's following us?" She didn't respond. Instead, she hunched lower in her seat as if trying to hide. A few miles later, headlights appeared behind us. At first, I thought it was just another car, but it got closer, too close. The driver started flashing their high beams, and the car swerved erratically. I sped up, but the other car matched my speed. "Don't stop," the woman said, her voice trembling. I gripped the wheel, my heart pounding until we reached a small gas station. The other car vanished as quickly as it had appeared. When I turned to talk to the woman, she was gone. The seat was dry, as if she had never been there. I told the gas station attendant what had happened, and he just shook his head. "You're not the first to say that," he muttered. "People see her out there all the time." Ethan and I had been planning our road trip for weeks. We were eager to escape the monotony of college life and explore the open road. On the third night of our trip, we stopped at a diner in a small, rundown town. The food was greasy and the coffee tasted burnt, but it was all part of the adventure. As we were leaving the diner, we noticed a man standing near the entrance, holding a worn duffel bag. He looked to be in his 40s, his clothes tattered and his face weathered. "Headed west?" he asked. Ethan hesitated, but I nodded. "Yeah, we are. Need a ride?" The man introduced himself as Jack and climbed into the back seat. At first, he seemed friendly, sharing stories about hitchhiking across the country. But as the miles passed, he grew quieter. "Take the next left," he said suddenly, pointing to an unmarked dirt road. "That's not the way to the next town," Ethan said. "It's a shortcut," Jack replied, his tone sharp. Unease settled over us, but I turned onto the road anyway, figuring it couldn't hurt to shave off some time. The trees closed in around us and the air grew colder. Jack began fidgeting with his duffel bag, his eyes darting between Ethan and me. "What's in the bag?" Ethan asked nervously. Jack didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward, his face inches from mine. "Just a little farther," he said, grinning. The dirt road ended abruptly at an old, decrepit house. Jack opened the door and stepped out. "Thanks for the ride," he said, slinging his bag over his shoulder. We didn't wait to see what he was planning. I threw the car into reverse and sped back to the main road. When we stopped at a gas station, we noticed Jack had left his duffel bag in the back seat. Inside were ropes, knives, and a notebook filled with sketches of cars, including one that looked exactly like ours.